let's get back to the conversation about Gonzaga. How much do you view their ceiling differently now than you did maybe 2 weeks ago before the preseason, maybe after the Michigan State game? Because we've seen them now twice, 2 games, not look all that impressive.
And that's the difference, right? You kind of look at a team on paper, and then when you see them, and especially when you see them in person like we did tonight, and they just look kind of underwhelming. And I think Mark Few would probably be the first one to admit that. You know, they don't have that guy, that dynamic either score like Jalen Suggs was, or a Chet Holmgren that was just kind of a unicorn type. Drew Timme is an unbelievable college basketball player, but he can't kind of do it alone. He's got to have a running mate, and I'm not sure who that running mate is. Julian Strawther, you want him to be that guy, but that's not his game either. It kind of needs to be a guard, and that's where I think Nolan Hickman is the key. He came out, he made a couple, threes early. He hurt his ankle. And I don't know how bad it was, but I think that's a concern coming out of here.
Yeah, Few said it was pretty banged up. But the big thing about Chet last year, his ability to protect the rim and his ability to space the floor offensively, like that gave Timme room to operate and still took care of a lot of Gonzaga's problems on the defensive end. So if guys are out playing the passing lanes, they got to run into Chet on the backside. They don't have that this year. That being said, I don't want to jump ship completely, because the pieces are still there, not elite pieces like they've had. So I wouldn't put them in the national championship picture, but a top 20 team and potentially a second weekend team is fully in.
They're still
but that's a big difference from where we all had them.
They're still a really, really good basketball team. But the difference is that instead of being elite, instead of being the kind of team where we look at them and say, yes, they can go win 36 games this year. Yes, they have a chance to go win a national title. It's like, yeah, you know what? They might be able to win 2 or 3 games in March. If they get to a second weekend, that's a good season for this group.
26, 27 wins.
Yeah, but the expectations, they're gonna get 20 wins in WCC play, and they're gonna find a way.
It is, but it isn't, because the expectations now are honestly like Final Four. That's what they are. Let's be honest. If they get bounced in the Sweet 16, that's a disappointing year for Mark Few and Gonzaga right now. That's the reality of it.
No, it is. I don't disagree, but what I'm saying is that if it's the same thing as what we would look at kind of with John Calipari a little bit. I know I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth in terms of what I'm going to tell you about Cal, but if your expectation is Final Four or bust, if your expectation is if this team is not a top 5 team, they're a disappointment, then that's something where like you can't. That's unfair to those programs to say that if you are not a top 5 team every single year, every single year, you're losing one and done.
Again, I'm not saying it's fair. That's the reality.
That's unfair. And the other problem is this idea that just because Gonzaga, we talked about how good they were. We talked about their number 1 teams. We talked about potential undefeated season. Just because they only made it to 2 national title games and didn't win the title, just because they've only been to 2 of the last 5 Final Fours, that they're overrated or bust, or like that concept is ridiculous. Right? They proved themselves to the program. And if your down years are top 15, top 20 seasons, that says everything you need to know about how good they are.
All right. So I'll say this, and I'll throw this back to you. You watched Gonzaga tonight. You saw Kentucky last night. They play each other Sunday. And they're in Spokane. They're not at the Kennel, but they're at an arena, I think, that holds about 12,000. That's a couple miles away from campus. What do you think? When you look at those 2 teams right now, don't you think there's a big disparity in their talent?
And you think that Kentucky's more talented?
Far more talented.
Yes.
Far more talented.
I agree. And I don't know if I feel comfortable about saying Kentucky's going to win that game.
They may not win.
There's a lot of reasons we can get into that if you want to get into that. But I think that
home court advantage is a real thing in college. We don't need to discredit.
Yeah, we saw it right now.
And last year.
Yeah.
So it's coaching.
Yeah.
So it's coaching.
I'm going to let you have that
We'll get into that. But look, I think that to put a bow on it, T.O., correct me if I'm wrong. Gonzaga has a bunch of guys that are good. Andrew Timme. And when you don't have a killer in the perimeter, then it's very difficult to be a great college basketball team and a great basketball team, period. Because all you can do is what we've seen teams do to Timme the last 2 games. Claps everybody in.
And he ended up with a 18-9, and we thought they did a great job on him. And another thing you run into as well, when your guards aren't good and they're trapping Timmy in the post and he's having a hard time getting it out and they're not making shots, you're playing 2 against 3, especially tonight. And Tyrese Hunter and how good he was and how good that Texas shot the ball as a whole, 40% on the night, or 39-9. Math is here, there, everywhere. But that being said, you're playing 2s against 3s. And whenever there's not that extra guy, that guard that can really turn the game on his head with their speed. And a little bit of that was Texas too. So Texas at the beginning of the game, Gonzaga was getting what they wanted in semi-break situations. Texas had some better offensive possessions, and then Texas could get back and set their defense. And then Texas was much better, right? Especially, we didn't talk much to Coach Beard about the defensive end. Those 2 guards that were really good on offense. Like a lot of the reason they struggled to get it to Timmy was because of that ball pressure out on the perimeter.
What was crazy? Like I don't think that they were that great on the defensive end. They forced some turnovers, and some of it was just like sloppy play.
There's some big bodies.
There were probably 4 or 5 turnovers in the first half. That was just Gonzaga swinging the ball and making a lazy pass, 1 pass away. And some of that is that's the style that Texas wants to play defensively. They're gonna overhelp. They're gonna force you baseline. It's the no middle defense, right? Once the ball gets on one side, they're doing everything they can to not let it get to the other side. They want you to drive to that baseline. They want you to drive to the guy that they're anticipating getting to the throwing spot. So a lot of it is the way that it's built. But I thought that Gonzaga, minus the turnovers, was like good enough on that end if they're elite defensively. But they're not elite. They're bad defensively. And if you're going to win when you have those question marks defensively, you have to have killer. And down goes T.O.'s iPad. It's
no concern for my feelings there.
No concern. All right, let's get
like T.O. said, no rim protection also to make up for some of those.
no iPad protection either.
No iPad protection.
All right,